Yes, back in the place to be. Another GC talk. This time in particular, we are talking about Short Fuse's new album. I will do the talk show host thing here and hold up the album. It is Painkiller Boutique from Short Fuse. CD is available at uncommonnasa.com/shop, uncommonrecords.bandcamp.com. Go and check them out. They're fairly limited edition, at least this first edition is. So grab them while they're here. Don't make yourself wait. And of course, the album is also a free download on Bandcamp, thanks to Short Fuse doing that. So go and enjoy it. If you want to throw a couple bucks in for the digital download, that's great. You'll be able to stream it in the Bandcamp app if you do that. If that doesn't matter, then you can download it for free. And that's a done deal. And of course, it's streaming on all streaming services. Follow this guy on Spotify. So today we're going to talk about the album. I'll start first by at least introducing Short Fuse as I just did. So, how's your week going now that the album is out?
Yesterday was exciting and nerve-wracking at the same time, because you want people to respond to what you're doing and, enjoy it. And, part of you wants that adulation too, because
Yeah,
that's what it's about, putting out this art and hoping that people understand it and get it and connect with it. And it was a lot of that yesterday. So I slept really good because it was
for
it was a lot of work doing promo and, doing a day job too on top of it.
yeah,
So
yeah. People don't realize your album day is not a company holiday. You still have to work, So, but yeah. So look, I played a role in each of the songs. I took a bit of a I don't know if I'd say I took a bit of a step back. I think you kind of branched out, and I guess it's a good place to start because I want to get into a lot of the concepts of the record. But there was one thing I wanted to touch base on in terms of the presentation of the record because I mixed the entire thing and did some executive producing in terms of just like helping kind of set the tone through the mixes. I did some drops on the mixes. I did a little bit of playing. Some of it is credited, some of it isn't, depending on how minuscule it was, and such like that. So I was involved, but this is a step away from what we've done in the past together in terms of like autonomy and lobotomy music, and then later guillotine crowns, where my role was to produce the whole thing and give you a sound through that. So I kind of, like I said, I want to get into the concepts of the record and the themes of the record more so than anything else with this talk. But I do just want to start with that to begin with is like, I can say for myself, obviously I've produced some of my own records, but I've also had other producers produce my own music. And, I think to some extent, like Only Child and Halfway in particular, would not be the same records had I made the beats, had I produced them. I have a different approach, So, I mean, did that play a part? And I won't be offended if you say it's true, because like I said, for myself, that was true too. But my production sound, while I can certainly run the gamut between different emotions, it definitely has a certain feel to it. I think for me as a lyricist, even myself, there are times where I need to step away from my own sound in order to say certain things. Do you think that is a part of why, you ended up doing most of the production with other people that somewhat are from the same vein as myself, but definitely I think maybe give you a little bit more space to tell a deeper story? Is that part of it, or is that just the way it came to be because it came to be that way?
it was definitely part of it. I wanted to challenge myself because, you and I, we've worked together at this point for like, you know, 15 years consecutively. I mean,
Hmm.
outside a couple of cameos here and there over the years, um, you have exclusively produced my music. So it was part of it was, you know, trying to step out of my comfort zone and do something different just to see if I can do it. And then, it was a timing thing too because I started working on this album when we really started to dig into what would become Guillotine Crowns. And then when I told you that I was getting the itch to do some solo stuff, you had a lot on your plate. So I think it was a combination of like not wanting to focus on too much at once and, stretching yourself too thin. Um, and then because I remember you telling me like, yeah, I can get you beats, but it may not it may
Right.
not be as quick as you want. So for me, because um, I had been in a space where I wasn't writing a lot at the time, like this, once we started digging into guillotine and um, really getting into it, it kind of opened the floodgates for some other things, and so I didn't want it to, dampen my spark. So it was just one of those things where things lined up where, Kill posted a beat that would become graduation day. So I grabbed that from him, and then he started sending me other beats. And then it was just like I just started writing more and more. And then we were finishing up Guillotine. So it was just like I was like on this hot streak with writing that I didn't want to like uh, you know, dampen by, potentially waiting for you or anybody else for, beats. So I think and it gave me a different perspective, um and appreciation for you and what you do production wise, too, because a lot of these beats are different than what I usually rock, and it was a lot of fun because it gave me a different space to do different things, and the different beats made me feel different things. So it's a combination of those things, I think, that made me step out.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to note as a side step is like, and we'll talk about this a little bit toward the end of our chat, but like, Guillotine was this album sort of overlapped with the completion of Guillotine. A lot of these songs were either done at the same time or sort of started to overlap, and of course when they're completed was after Guillotine was done because that's when I freed up my board to do more mixes. But yeah, I mean, these came at the same time. So, I'd like to be one of those people that could just be like, yeah, man, I make like 4 beats a night. Like, just take whatever you want. Like, but I'm just not. Like when I make a beat, it's sort of an event in here. And I've made 3 beats in a night, but usually if I do I'm probably not making another beat for a couple of days or a couple of weeks. So, there was an impetus to for you, I think, to get this record made as well. But we'll touch a little bit about that process toward the end of the talk. But I think a lot of the reason that I brought up like sort of like the way the production sits and what you were able to get out of it is because you were really able to go a lot deeper into what I would say like are the identifiers that make you you on this record. So I want to talk a little bit about those different things, and we'll go as far as you are comfortable with and as far as makes sense with it. I just want to make sure you're not here against your
No,
will.
no, man.
This is the conversation that you want to have. And so we'll dive into some of these topics now because they're on the record. And I think, a great thing about this piece of art is that I think somebody could theoretically listen to this record and be like, wow, I wonder, what this would be like if he was talking about this. You know what I mean? Because there's only so much you can express in a song, just like there's only so much you can express in speech. So hopefully this completes the circle for a little bit of what's on the record, because some of these things are things you've touched upon on Autonomy and on Lobotomy. Those were also heavy records that were somewhat introspective, particularly Lobotomy music. But now this is a different level. This is you, I think, really having a life experience and depth of knowledge of yourself to really come forward with a record like this.
Yeah, man. I think that's exactly it. I think lobotomy was like me just kind of parsing through like my spiritual journey at the time. Um, and putting
Mm-hmm.
that down and just coming to grips with that. And then, autonomy was, came from a place where I was coming off this like long hiatus and wasn't sure if I was going to do anything after that. Um, and I say it all the time, and I've said it before and other things that we've talked on the channel that I just kind of left you with like the skeleton of a record, and you made that record sound what it is, you know, because I literally just came and recorded all the verses in a weekend and
Right.
was like,
Yeah.
here you go, you know. So I think that's the other reason why this record was important to me
Mm.
personally, was I wanted to see if I could do it, you know, because even though the stuff you and I have done is, you know, technically solo material, like you were my right hand man, you know, through all of it.
Right.
So this was the first time where I was just kind of left to my own devices, you know, to come up with like, you know, obviously I came up with the concepts for the other records, but you know, you were always there to bounce those off of in real time. And you know, you could say, yeah, this is working, this is not, and you know, let's go this direction. So, you know, even though there was a little bit of that on this album, for the most part,
Hmm.
I was left to figure these things out by myself. And then after the fact, you know, you would, you know, give feedback or, uh, you know, things like that.
Yeah, the big difference is this record, each song came to me as a fully formed idea, you know, as opposed to like a collaboration. You know, I wasn't being handed clay, you know, that was half formed. I was being handed sculptures, you know, that I needed to then put the right lighting on. You know what I'm saying? And there's a big difference. And so that's a credit to you. And that is, I think that's a good analogy for this record in terms of conceptually. So, you know, let's get into some of the things that you talk about. Like I said, so from the very beginning of the record, you know, "Drowning in My Own Skin" really gets into, among other things, but it gets into, you know, for lack of a better term, and you can tell me how you want to term it, you know, like your disabilities, um, and you know, "Chronic Pain," obviously is the song that really, you know, is just a penetrating portrayal of that.
Drawn from a broken stencil, my end view is in the rear view and did through as a stolen rental. Focus mental pushes my physical metal. Dreams of biomechanical metal fed through my exoskeleton. Tattoos scribed on my skin to distract from my melanin. Pain swings like an ankle pendulum. Molecular structure of muscles hustles down a beaten path. My face hides the pain underneath an uneven mass. Evident my strength is leaving fast. Reaching for the flask and pain pills. My soul's crushed, the pain kills. My brain aims faith at the strained ills.
Let's talk about cerebral palsy to start this. Um, because most of us are ignorant hip hoppers that don't know anything. Um, just describe what the ailment is, and to some degree how it affects you.
So what it is it's a nervous system ailment. So it affects your, you know, some of your muscle movements and your response time. You know, in some people it affects neurological um
Mm,
situations. So for me personally, like I've actually am very fortunate to have a lesser severe case of it. Because for the most part, I've been able to live a normal life. You know what I mean? You know, and as a kid, I played sports. You know, I did normal kid things.
mm,
I did normal teenager things. You know, there's people that have, you know, severe cases that, you know, they're wheelchair bound, you know, permanently. They can't really move. Some people can't talk. Actually, when
mm.
I was younger, uh, I remember them, you know, doctors just wanting me to be wheelchair bound, and my mom was like, "No, you know, it's not happening." I actually didn't learn to walk until I was 4 years old. Um,
Well,
because, you know, credit to my mom in that instance is she, you know, she just didn't want that particular life for me, so she kind of took it in her own hands. Because I think at that time, you know, this is the early '80s at this point.
it was a dark
You
time
know,
in general. Yeah.
they didn't know a lot about it. And plus, I think with us being, you know, on the poorer side, we just didn't have access to high level care. Because you know, I don't know this for sure, but I'd assume that we were probably dealing with like, you know, some public, uh, clinical people that just didn't
Mm.
have all the answers, and they were just, you know, keen on just stuffing me in a box and being like, well, this is what we do with everybody else that has this
Right.
disability, so we'll just go that route. So th that's that's how that impacted me. And for a long time, and again, for better or for worse, my mom didn't really allow me to view myself as disabled. Um,
Hmm.
so for a long time, I didn't even really consider that. I think when it really started to like make a difference was as I got a little older, like, junior high school. That's when it was like, you really start to feel different because, the kids will pick on you because they don't know, kids they just see a different person, but they don't understand why that person's different. And when you're 8, 11, even 15, 16, you don't have the agency or the wherewithal to ask a question on, maybe why this person is different and what's going on with them. So there was a lot of bullying going on. And again, for better or for worse, I learned to defend myself pretty quickly. And just set me up to, just to take different paths. And um I wanted to talk about it for a long time, in my music, but I just didn't know how. Because I didn't want to come off like I was like being preachy or, trying to play it like a sympathy card. But then
Hmm.
as I got older and, started getting more active and, back into the music after my hiatus, I just, something clicked, man. I felt like it was time to talk about it, and I finally found the words. And I kind of felt like, representation is a big thing these days. So I
Yes.
kind of felt like, if I could reach somebody that maybe dealt with similar things that didn't have the ability to put it down in the words like I can, and that makes them feel seen and heard, and, lets them know that they're not by themselves, then I'm with it. So
Right. So this is something that are you diagnosed with this from birth, or is this something that develops or is seen over
no,
time,
this is
like other chronic
this is
diseases can
something
be?
that's diagnosed from birth. Yeah.
Okay, got you. And so, yeah, okay. So I'm going to go to this, which is an interesting question because I don't know exactly the answer. I don't remember if we've talked about this off air before yet. For a lot of hip hop people, the only thing they know about cerebral palsy is Redman's line.
Right.
So tell me, knowing you, for so long, I mean, I've known you like half my life now, which is kind of crazy, or almost half my life at least. Um, how how do you interpret his line and what he said? And for those that don't know, I'm not going to do a word for word imitation of Redman doing something ignorant when he was in his 20s, but basically he has that line, and I think it's Headbanger. I'm not
He
exactly
he he
sure, but
actually
it's like,
he actually said it twice. He said it in
of course he did. Why
he
not?
said it in Tonight's the Night. And that's
Right,
that's the biggest that
right.
is that's
So he has this line where he basically says, "Rah rah," like I got cerebral palsy. How do you interpret what he meant by that, or like, is he just not understand it, or like, how does that work? Like, and how did that hit you, being a teenager, and hearing like what you're going through, kind of like encapsulated in like half a bar? You
um
know,
so he definitely does. I don't think he understood what he was like. I understood what he was trying to do as a rapper,
right.
but from like a scientific and like real life technical standpoint,
From a medical
yeah.
point of view,
um,
it's not Dr. Noble. No, not at all.
I think that he just, maybe he, and this is just, guessing, but maybe at some point
Right.
maybe he saw somebody that had cerebral palsy, or I mean, maybe he knew somebody that had, a more severe case, and you know came across somebody that had, you know muscle spasms, and different reactions that they couldn't control, because some of it
Hmm.
in the more severe cases is auditory, where people do make noises without being able to control it. So I don't know. um
Yeah.
that's a guess. It could have just came from a place of young person ignorance. Maybe he just
Right.
thought it was something funny, and he put it down. I mean, I've been guilty of it, myself. Stuff that I wrote in my 20s, I go back and I'm like, damn, like, I'm glad none of these people heard that. So obviously
Yeah.
Redman's one of the best rappers of all time, and very well known. So for me personally, I never took any offense to it, because it was not something that affected me on like a personal level. Um, you know, I've For a long time I always wanted to like use the line in a song and like flip it, but I never
Yeah.
got a chance to do it. And I wanted to do it on this record, but we just couldn't find a space to do it,
Yeah.
where it would make sense and not come off as offensive, I think. Um, but
Yeah.
when I heard it, it was just like, as a young person, it was like, oh shit, people know about this. So, um, not the way that you want to be,
Right. Yeah.
not the
Yeah.
way that you want to be acknowledged and seen, but it was just like, at that time I was, getting involved in the battle scene and things like that. So like, it didn't really affect me on like some, on a visceral level. I was like, it made me feel negatively. But I will say that if Redman ever sees this, he owes me a verse, or he owes me something. So
Yeah, I mean, I should say that like I am a big fan of Redman, and being from Staten, he's kind of like an adopted Wu member, and from what I understand, he still owns some property on Staten Island and is a part of some businesses out here, and so he's kind of an adopted Shaolin head to begin with. But that being said, like Fuze probably has listened to more Redman albums front to back than even I have. So it comes from a place of that, but it also, the reason I mention it is because I know that this is a hip hop audience, and there are going to be a lot of like ashamed 40 or 30 somethings that are going to listen to your record and be like, huh, and like, not because that's their only point of reference for what this is. That hopefully I'm like bridging the gap. You get into your family or familial situation a few times growing up, having a father who, and I'll let you fill in the gaps on this. I'm not going to tell your story for you, but like that, from what I understand from the record, wasn't there. And then, a stepfather came in, and that was also a bad situation, and maybe different and similar ways. I also know, and I don't know how much you mentioned this on the record, but I think maybe you've mentioned it in different places or wherever on other songs, but you come from, obviously a Latino background, but also a mixed background. And I wonder, like just to get sort of the story of, you know, sort of like what you're talking about in Hell's Mosh Pit in particular, with the two fathers cycling in and out, but also how, the nature of, if at all, it played a factor, like the nature of like the mixed race relationship like played a role in any of that outcome that you hear on Hell's Mosh Pit.
100% it does. So my father, my biological father's Mexican. Um, he's an immigrant from Mexico. He immigrated here early, uh, in his younger years. Met my mom, and um, they had me and my brother. He was physically abusive to her and to me. And he was an alcoholic. So that played a lot into, what kind of person he was at the time. Um, so and being a disabled person, he didn't understand what that meant. I
Mm.
don't think because I remember there'd be times when when I was younger, I'd trip and I'd fall and he'd get upset. Um, I just so for him, I think it was just he wanted a quote unquote like normal son, and because firstborn boys are a huge deal in Mexican families, because we're
Mm.
the idea is like you're gonna be the one that's gonna carry the legacy forward, and you're gonna carry the name forward, and uh you're gonna take the baton and
Right.
do everything that I couldn't do. So there's in some families, not all, but in a lot of Hispanic families, there's a lot of pressure to do what your parents couldn't do. So
Yeah.
they live vicariously through you. So for him, I think it was like you know, for him, I think it was like, man, I'm not going to be able to, live out these things because he's not going to be able to do these things. So he was writing me
Wow.
off at a very early age, and there was a lot of frustration. And I don't, to be honest, I don't know what his background was. Because
Mm.
I've gotten back in contact with that side of the family in recent years, and they're all good people. So I
Mm-hmm.
he seemed to be the outlier. So I don't know
Mm.
what caused him to take the route that he did with his alcoholism and his abusiveness. And my mom was like real young when she had me. So that played a part in it, because she was a baby basically raising babies. My mom had just turned 16 when she had me. And then, she was 22 when she had my brother. So so
Wow. Yeah.
that
Big difference.
even at 22, that's still super young. So
Absolutely.
it's a situation of where it's legitimately like, super young people raising babies. Because even if if I had to guess, because my one of my cousins told me, but I forgot what she said because we figured out what his age difference was at one point, but I don't remember what she said. But
Mm.
even if he was in his, mid 20s, 25,
Yeah.
26, that's still young. And if you don't
Yeah.
have, the self-awareness to understand like why you're feeling the things that you're feeling, then it's just gonna project onto your children. Um, so it was a lot. There was physical abuse, and the absence that because he was a heavy drinker, so he spent a lot of time at bars and wasn't really around. And when he was around, he was drunk
Mm.
or passed out. Um, and then when my mom left him, she got involved with my stepdad, and he was also an alcoholic. He was like
Mm.
emotionally abusive, so it was like it was a different thing. And then where the mixed race identity comes in is my mom could my mom hated my father so much for what he put us through. Ultimately, I don't think she ever really healed from it, to be honest with you. Um,
Right.
and it took me a long time. I carried that anger around for years, into my
Mm-hmm.
late 20s. But then it was just like, man, this is just affecting me now. This isn't even affecting him because I he at this time, we weren't
Yeah.
talking, we didn't see each other. So I'm like, it doesn't, it's not affecting him. It's just affecting me now. I gotta let this go. So just at some point, I just let it go. But she didn't, and there was times, where she would tell me like, "You're not Mexican,"
Mm.
you know, um,
Mm.
you're mixed. You're not Mexican.
And your mom comes from a
No,
mixed
my mom,
background,
my
or is she
mom is
white?
white. Yeah.
Okay,
So
got you. Okay.
and then you couple in the fact that you know I'm not Mexican enough for, you know, Mexican kids at school because I don't speak Spanish. So they,
Hmm.
there's there's a uh you're marked with that too growing up because they don't look at you as Mexican either because well you don't speak Spanish so you must have not grown up the Hispanic way, which is not true. There's
Right.
there's
Sure.
plenty of things that I experienced that are unique to Hispanic culture, and I still had other family around at the time that took me under their wing and showed me things and taught me things. Fortunately, Spanish just wasn't one of those things, but that doesn't make me less Mexican. But then,
Right.
I was too brown for the white kids. So,
Hmm.
and at that time, we had just moved to the suburbs, so then
Right.
it was weird because where I grew up in Chicago, it was all black kids. Um, and when I where I went to school it was black kids, Puerto Ricans, Mexicans, some Polish and some Russian, but there wasn't like American white people uh, in that school
Right.
that I went to at the time. At least none that I remember coming across. So by the time I got to the suburbs, um, towards the end of high school, it was like culture shock because you know I have white family, but they're not like typical, stereotypical like white bread, all American,
Right.
white people. They're people that grew up around,
Hmm.
you know, different backgrounds and things like that. They're along the lines of like what you are. So, you're a white person, but
Right.
you grew up around different backgrounds and you grew up in an urban setting and things like that. So you understand and have appreciation of different cultures and backgrounds. So
Yeah.
that was like big culture shock for me because it was almost like you were like um, a fish in a fish bowl. People would stare at you and ask you crazy questions and
Yeah.
like, "Oh, you're from Chicago? Like, did you ever?" And then plus, with not understanding like what my disability was, people would make assumptions that I was shot and like I had a guy. I had a
I
guy
remember
tell
that.
me that, like, "Oh, you were shot." Like, no, I wasn't. This is what it is. No, 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 you were shot. Like, and he just would not take
Yeah.
the real answer as the answer. So, you deal with stuff like that.
Wow.
And so for a long time growing up, I didn't know where I fit in, So
Hmm.
rap music really helped me kind of find a place uh, to be accepted, um, which I'm super thankful for because I couldn't
Yeah.
imagine not having that outlet because it allowed me to like write things in a safe space and not feel judged. And then when I started recording and doing shows, like that became like my armor. Like I, I wasn't I was, when I was performing or recording or making music, I wasn't like a mixed race kid that didn't have a place. I wasn't a disabled person. Like it was like I'm doing something that not
Hmm.
a lot of people can do at a high level.
Right. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. That's dope. I guess to wrap up this segment, like, for the people that really listen to the record, deeply, may be curious, in one way or another, like, you know, what relationship do you have with with your father and with your stepfather and family at this point? Like, like just as much as you're comfortable sharing, obviously.
at one point I did try and reconnect with my biological father, but and credit to him, he did get sober and did turn himself around and um, you know, uh, seemingly like kind of heal from whatever he was dealing with. So I can give him that credit and big up him for
Hmm.
that. But on a personal level, by the time him and I reconnected again, it was like just two strangers, It was just um it was just like there was nothing. There was by this time we were from two completely different worlds. Um,
Yeah,
and there was just nothing there to like really connect us outside of obviously being father and son. But it
sure.
just wasn't enough to, enough there to build something on because, I'm very Americanized, obviously, and
Yeah.
he still is not,
Mm.
so he
Does he go back and forth,
I'm
or is he in the
He,
States full
I'm not
time?
sure. But
Mm.
he's just, there's certain viewpoints and things that he didn't
Right. Sure.
understand, and he tried. I'll give him the credit. He did try,
Mm.
but it just fell flat, and just ultimately we just fell out of touch again. And as far as my stepfather, him and I don't speak. It just got to the point where I was like in my early 30s, and I'm raising, my own family at this point, and uh it just got to the point where he was just too critical all the time, and it just got to the point where it was like every time I called to speak to my mom, it was um just I'd feel anxious, stressed out. And it's just like I shouldn't
Mm.
feel this way to talk to somebody that's supposed to love and care for me, because every time I'd call, he'd pick up. So then it would be, 30, 40 minutes of him criticizing whatever I was doing, even if there was no
Right.
reason for it, and just to talk to my mom. So it
Yeah.
got to the
Yeah.
point where like I'd get anxious and like nervous because I didn't, I was just like, man, I don't want to deal with this shit, every single time. And then it got to the point where I just stood up for myself, and I was just like, listen, I can't talk to you anymore. It's just you're not good for my emotional and mental health.
Yeah.
I just want to talk to my mom. And my mom was like, well, if you don't talk to him, you can't talk to me. Long story short.
Ish.
And
Yeah.
I was like, okay. And we stopped talking. So, and then they
Wow.
didn't like that I was trying to get in touch with my father at the time. So there was like a lot of threats uh lobbed my way,
Oh,
and
I see.
some
Yeah.
crazy threats and things that were said that was just like, you know what, you can't take that back. Um so and then they started attacking my aunt because she support she was my aunt's always been real supportive of me because she's like my second mom, and she helped me through a lot of things when my own mom wouldn't. Um so
Mhm.
they started to attack her on a lot of levels. So it became a big mess, and they slowly started cutting off different parts of the family. And then it just got to the point where everybody was just going their own way, you know? So,
Yeah.
so.
I mean, I should say, and we'll cycle out of this portion of it with this, but like, I've known you through some of the things that you're describing because we've known each other since we were in our mid 20s or so, mid to late 20s at least. And in recent years, I'm just saying this from afar, obviously, but in recent years, you've reconnected with a lot of members of your family, um, locally in the Chicago area and, probably out in the suburbs and stuff like that. And it's been really, I mean, it's been really, obviously, it goes without saying, it's been really beneficial to you because I don't know, you were in Milwaukee for a while, so you're kind of cut off from a lot of family and a lot of that support. So, I don't want to leave people with the impression that like, you're a black sheep or
No,
something like that. I mean, you have family around you, which is really good. And I just want to end on a positive note in that regard, and just kind of put that out there for
no.
you.
My family, a lot of my family's always been really supportive. I just think at certain points they didn't know how to be supportive. Because
Word.
my family's not the type, we're not nosy people, like, uh, you know, my family's we're all the kind of people like, if you want to share something and you want to talk about something, we're here, but we're not going to be all up in your business like that. So it's a
Right.
great thing because you're not being micromanaged by other people, that are like trying to be like helicopter,
Right.
like, what's going on? What are you doing? But then,
What are you doing for the next
but
5 years of
then,
your life? Tell me now.
but then when you go through some of the things that I went through mentally and emotionally, you're you kind of, and I'll put this on myself, and I don't think it was like on purpose, but there was a point where I distanced myself from them, I think subconsciously, because I was like, man, like I'm dealing with all this shit. I don't want to put this on them. I'm a grown person. I got to figure
Hmm.
this out myself. And, that's not really the way to approach things, you know.
Right.
Um,
That's hard. That makes things a lot
it is.
harder.
I think, and I don't know, but I think maybe if I would have at the time would have went to them and say, hey, I'm really dealing with this. I don't know what to do. Maybe I could have turned around things faster and maybe things would have been different.
Hmm.
But that I think that comes from my parents, because you know uh again, in Hispanic households, when shit happens, you know it's this stays in the house. You don't talk about this shit.
Right.
So that was very
Right.
much my mentality, better for better or for worse. When shit happened, it was like, gotta keep it to myself and just push through, because I can't be weak. And therapy, going to therapy and finally talking about things with you and therapists and other people, kind of just gave me that safe space to be like, man, it's okay to talk about this shit. It's okay to show emotions and feel down and be sad, and not to have all the answers, because a lot of it I didn't have the
Right.
answer for at the time, and it was just situations where you just had to just ride it out and wait for things to unfold in front of you and then figure it out. So now, it's you know I'm much better at processing, what the situation is and figuring things out faster. And if I don't have the answer, I'm okay with coming to you and be like, yo, what do you think about this? Or going to my cousin or going to my aunt or anybody else and being like, man, I'm dealing with this. What do you think? Versus just keeping it inside and waiting for it to blow over. And that's kind of helped me talk about things like, my chronic pain and, disability, because again, those are things that people are just taught to keep to themselves, because we all have things, we all have issues. So I think, some people are taught to just be like, well, this is just part of the game and I just got to deal with it. And, it's
That kind of cycles me back to something that I missed asking about earlier in terms of the cerebral palsy. Like, what is your, how does that affect you at this point? Like, what is your daily um, with dealing with that?
I don't know, because my back issues take more of a front and center role in my daily pain management. Like, I don't think it's the
But that's caused by the issues, like, because I guess I should say this because not everybody may know this, and maybe I'm describing it wrong. I'll let you fill in the gaps. But like in terms of like the actual, you know, uh, air quotes disability, like this is something that's affecting your lower body, as I see it, as I've stood with you, right? I mean, it's basically you have like some sort of nerve damage to your either like your hips or your lower legs or something like that. Is that fair to say?
yeah, but the doctors, they don't know how much of a role it played in, my back issues. Um,
Right. That's what I was going to say is like, because that to me would be part of, maybe just the pressure, from keeping the stance that you do as a, walking as you do, like maybe that causes the problems with the back, or maybe you just, got unlucky with the back as
I
well.
mean,
But,
it's
um, yeah.
it's probably a combination of the two, but doctors have been kind of hesitant to say, yeah, it's concrete because of this,
Mm.
it's concrete because of this, because if you I've been thankful to find good doctors that have not put things in a box per se, and they've been willing to try new things. Because
Right.
realistically, my back issues aren't going away, and obviously my disability isn't going away. So you have to, at this point, it's just
Right.
about figuring out ways to manage it. And when I do have back, severe back spasms and I'm incapacitated, um, it's to the point where it's like, okay, I'm just out for the day instead of 2 weeks. You know what I mean? So that's where
Right.
I'm at now
Right.
with it. So
So diving back into the record directly, Detention is one of the most telling songs, and it just clicks really well with Messiah Music's beat. And it's obviously one of the more head boppy beats on the record. So it draws you in to hear that part of the story. And then that song, coming out of Comfort Food and going into Me and My Demons, I think it's sort of like a nice little segue of like the coming of age element on the personal side for you. So getting into that section of the record in particular, how did you end up like in jail in that moment to the degree that you're comfortable sharing, of course. And just talk about like the level of like, involvement you had in without getting into details that aren't unnecessary to share, but like, just because you talk about it on your records and certainly on this one, like, you know, uh, what was the involvement in that side of Chicago life at that time in terms and how did you kind of get out of it and how did how did that whole part of your life get navigated by and or be caused by you know uh carrying around the cerebral palsy?
so being with I'm assuming you're referring to like gang affiliation and things like that. Yeah, so that
Yeah,
came about
yeah,
just from like an a necessity for like protection, because in those days in the 90s, you know, a lot of times you couldn't be, not, there's levels, right? So you could be full-fledged like gangbanger out there doing like
right,
legitimate dirt, because I knew dudes that were like
right,
hardcore drug dealers that had bodies, um, that, were
yeah,
doing crazy shit. And then you had guys like me that, were affiliated with them because you knew people that were down and, you wanted an element of protection. And it, it also being poor, it gave me an opportunity to make money for better or for worse. Um,
hmm,
so, that's what it was for me. Like I was never one of those guys that was out there doing like crazy dirt. Like I kind of knew
right,
where my moral compass, began and stopped. And that's not to knock anybody that, has done crazy things
right,
because, when you grow up in an environment where you have nothing, it, it affects you, it affects everybody differently. Some people, like
yes,
I always fortunately viewed it as like, okay, I don't have these things, so what can I do to get myself into a better position? And for some people, it's I don't have anything. I'm never gonna have anything, so I'm just gonna do whatever I need to do to get what I need.
hmm,
And I don't care who I have to, step on, hurt, whatever. So for me, like I knew where my line was, and I dabbled in things. Um, where after it was done, I was like, yeah, I can't do that again. Yeah, so I
right,
knew where my line was and what I want. It's funny to put it in these terms, but I knew what I wanted from it. I just I
hmm,
it was a place of of acceptance because during that time I was around people they didn't view me as like a disabled person or a mixed race
Right.
person. It was just like I was just one of the dudes on the block, So um, I it's crazy to think about it in this way, but I fit in there, you know. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
it opened up some doors for me to, make some money when I didn't have money, and I learned things from the old from the OGs that I would apply to making music and selling my music as an independent artist, which is crazy to say, but it
Yeah.
gave
Yeah.
like going through those situations and being around people gave me confidence to just be me, you know, learn how to approach people and, taking the game that was given to me and applying it to myself and, uh, running with it.
Swagger in the face of disaster. Fuck your gods and pastors. They put you out the pasture for not slaving to the masters. Straight up pocket pad you for gatekeeping. Vague truth. They call it faith and pay dues. The system is built to shame you. Pull the wool over. Kept blunts and gats in my pullover. Never sober in hazed rooms. Surrounded by more burners than phase two.
I ended up in jail, by happenstance. I was outside smoking a joint and cop rolls around and he's like, what are you doing? I'm like, and he saw me, so I wasn't gonna lie. I'm like, I'm smoking. And he's like, it's not a cigarette. And I was like, nope. And then he was like, all right, well, I'm gonna make the rounds if you're still out here. When I get back around, it's gonna be something. And I was like, yeah, whatever. So he left. I put the joint out, but I didn't go back, inside. I was just sitting out there. And he pulls back around. He's like, this is what I told you. And so then, they
I don't know why
did.
they get off on that. I've been in that same situation in terms of a cop saying, all right, I saw you. I'm going to go drive around the block. If you're here when I get back, blah, 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 blah. And I've experienced that myself and heard about that other times. And I don't know what the angle is on that. I don't know why they. I
Yeah.
mean, obviously it's a power trip, but a power trip would just be locking you up right there. You know what I'm saying? Like, so you could, a power trip is why these guys wear these uniforms in the first place. So like, I don't get the
It's
monotony of like doing. But that's a thing that
yeah,
I've seen over and over. Being a graffiti kid, like I've experienced that, and going into different neighborhoods with different friends where myself as a white person is an unusual thing to see in that neighborhood. The cops come on you right away, and I've experienced that with cops where they're like, "You got to get out of here because you don't belong here,"
it's
and I'm just like, I'm here
right.
because I know these
It's
people, like. But then they'd come back and they'd re-question me and shit. And so it's a very similar thing to what you're saying. I don't understand where that comes from or why that tedium of that procedure is so universal across
it's
cities in
addiction
America.
contest, man. That's what it is. They just like,
Yeah,
I'm gonna
that's
put my
true.
shit on
Yeah,
the table. You're gonna put your shit on the table, and we're gonna see who wins. And ultimately, they're they know they're gonna win most of the time because of that
right.
uniform.
Yeah.
So that's what it is. So yeah,
Hmm.
so he winds up arresting me, and then they lock me up, and then they're, oh, we're gonna hit you with the intent to distribute charge, and I'm like, what? It's a fucking joint. Like, I'm not, like, even if I did,
Oh
even if
wow,
I
that's
did
crazy.
sell it, I'm getting, like, at the time,
Right,
20 bucks for it at most. It's not like I'm like,
right,
sitting there with
right.
like pounds of weed outside getting ready to fucking go make 20 grand or some shit. So, and then they, when you get in there, they start fucking with you because they know,
Mm.
you're fresh, because I had never been to gym.
You mean the other people that are
No,
incarcerated at the
not
time,
only
or
them,
or
but also also
and
the
also,
guards and
yeah.
officers in the jail. They know, because I'd never been to jail
Hmm.
at that time. I'd never been arrested, at that time.
Hmm.
So they just, their they make it their thing to just fuck with you. And then on top of it, at the time, I had a visible gang tattoo on my right arm that's now covered. And
Hmm.
so they're like, oh, because they know, so they're like,
Yeah.
oh, oh, you're one of them, huh? So they put me in a cell with you know, quote unquote rivals because they thought those guys would fuck with me, and some of them did. And
Oh
most of them
wow.
was like,
Wow.
we're here for the same shit you're here for. There's no I was fortunate because in some places it's not like that.
Mm,
Some places, the
right.
lines are legitimately drawn, and
Mhm.
gangbanging is like still very much a thing in jail.
Do you think if you were a little bit older at the time that it might have been
Maybe,
different?
but I also
With the rivals, maybe the rivals were like, "Fuck, I'm in jail. I'm not gonna
yeah,
fuck with this kid right now."
maybe,
But
but
you
also,
know,
but I also the way that I came up, I was never a guy that was like that had to prove himself. So that was not like I never had that air to
hmm
like where I walk in a room and I gotta
right,
prove I'm hard or I'm this. Because even when I was like quote unquote gang banging, I wasn't really gang banging. Like I wasn't
right,
like yeah, I got into fights and I carried a gun and did things that gang bangers do. But for me, it was always about just the the safety element, um, and then also just having the opportunity. For me, it was always money. For some
yeah.
guys, they again, it was
They're trying to get their
yeah, and
psychiatry out
also
of the
they
shit.
they whether they were going through things at home, I don't know, but they get out in that street and it's
Right.
just like it's showing proof time, for better for worse,
Hmm.
so I think it was just a combination of just knowing, to keep my mouth shut, not ruffle any feathers, and just having that overall general presence of just not being that guy that's gonna want to test people. Plus, the reason I wrote the song the way that I did, because the first verse is,
Yeah.
kind of like a stereotypical rap, hardcore, I'm in jail verse. And then I turn the concept on its head,
Hmm.
and then the second verse is like, oh, fuck, I'm in here. Fuck this place. I'm never coming back. I'm not built for
Right.
this shit.
Yeah. That's what I was getting. Yeah, that's what I was getting to. Is like the song itself. For those that haven't heard it, that might be finding this interview without hearing the song or without hearing the whole album. It's the reason I'm asking these questions and the reason that Fuse is, in my opinion, is talking about these things on these records is not to glorify this or try to show some kind of cred or bona fide because frankly, like if that's what it was about, Fuse could have been rapping about much different shit for a much longer time. It's to me, I interpret it as like, this is a cautionary tale, for lack of a better term. This is my experience and how this woke me up, and that ties into a lot of the other themes of the record. So if you want to speak on that a bit in terms of the concept and how the
Yeah,
second
I mean,
verse ends and all that.
comfort food was about, you know, me being in the street doing street shit and being around street dudes. Um,
Hmm.
and then comfort food was about me suffering the consequences of being in that environment. And then realizing like, oh shit, I'm really not, because I have friends that went to jail like religiously, and I had friends that
Hmm.
legitimately liked going to jail. I don't know why. Maybe it's just maybe they just got caught up in the system at some
Yeah.
point, and that's just what they knew, and they didn't know anything else, and they
Yeah,
didn't
I
feel
think that's
comfortable being on the
yeah.
outside anymore, which is really sad when you think about it.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
but for me, it was just like, man, I don't ever want to come back to a place like this, because you got people in there, telling you when to eat, telling you when to shower, watching you shave, watching you shower, and then telling you when you can sleep, um, and when you can go do certain activities, and that's not for me. And
Right.
shit, I remember being the first night I was in there, there was a guy. you know, because the thing, you know, you the people that have been in there for a while, or they're getting ready to be transferred somewhere else because they're higher degrees of crime. So they're serving longer sentences, so they got to be moved. Because I was in county, I was in county jail. So these guys, there's guys in there that are waiting to be moved to penitentiaries for longer sentences.
Wow.
So they'll ask you, "What are you in there for?" And this one guy
Hmm.
was like, "I'm in here for parking tickets," and they just, I mean, it was like as soon as he said parking tickets, there was like 10 dudes on this guy just beating the shit out of him. I was
Really?
like,
Why would you even say that though, man? Like, I mean, I'm not trying to knock the guy who probably had a tough life to begin with, but if I'm in jail, I'm just gonna lie and say some other shit. I don't know, assault or something, at least to like maybe,
but that
like
that's but
parking
that's
tickets
just
is
that
that's a rough one. I was jaywalking. It's like almost
but
sitcom-esque,
that
you
just
know what
goes
I
to show
mean?
that it's
Like,
like again, it just spotlights, you know, I don't know, how many parking tickets that guy had. Maybe he had, hundreds or thousands of dollars of
right.
parking tickets. Who knows? But does a situation like that warrant, hardcore jail time?
No, of course
Does
not.
me having a
Yeah.
joint and being in possession of a joint warrant,
Right.
being in jail for almost a month? No, hell no. Um,
Wow.
but then that leads to the next thing.
That's crazy. That's crazy that you were in there for that long for just what is a juvenile kind of, no matter what your age was, like an inconsequential, I guess is the better word. I mean, but also we're seeing it through, 2022 eyes, where like in most major cities, like, weed has been decriminalized, if not legalized. Um, so I'm not saying it was ever good to put people in jail for smoking a joint. I'm just saying cops
Oh
saw
yeah,
it a
for
lot
sure.
differently then. Like they equated fucking smoking a joint with fucking smoking a pipe, and there's uh, not that either should be harshly criminalized and jailed, but obviously there's a difference
Oh,
between different
100%.
drugs.
But
So,
that leads me to the next thing, like, uh, you know, when I was in there, when you're growing up in that kind of environment, your boys always like, yeah, man, if you ever get locked up, I got you, and this, and this,
hmm,
and sure enough, you know, I get locked up, I don't hear from anybody, and in grand scheme of things, it was
yeah,
only 3 weeks, it was less than a month, but 3 weeks is,
there's enough
yeah,
time for somebody to get in touch with you though if they
yeah,
were really
in
connected
that
like that.
type of environment, that's a long fucking time, man. Um,
Absolutely. That's that. They ain't no weekends. That's 7 days. That's 7 days of a
so it
week.
was enough time for me to know, man, I don't ever want to come back to a place like this. But then, it really kind of showed me who my friends were because, when I got released,
Hmm,
because I was living on my own, I had a couple roommates at the time. I go back to the house and people are partying at the house. And I was like,
hmm,
what the fuck? Like, why didn't anybody reach out? Why didn't anybody, try and bail me out? But you guys are out here partying in my house? Like, what the fuck
right.
is this? So that kind of showed me like who my
Jeez.
true friends were. So I wound up cutting off a lot of people. And at that
Yeah.
time, like I had met Augury, who was in Wastelands with me, and like I was kind of exposing him to shit that I didn't really want to expose him to because he was good, he's always been a good dude, good head on his shoulders,
Right.
stand-up guy. So I was like, man, me and him were like trying to do this rap thing. So I was like, I can't do both. And I went to the
Right.
OGs and I
Right.
was like, this is what I want to do. And they're like, yeah, you can't do both.
Hmm.
So
Wow.
if that's what you want to do, you can go and just make sure you
Hmm.
put your all into it. And we got you if you need something. And a lot of people don't know this, but that street money was the reason why I was able to put the first Wastelands record out. So because they They understood, so I can appreciate that because a lot of people don't get out
Yeah.
smooth like I got out. So,
Right.
um,
Right.
so I'm thankful for that too.
Well, so man. Well, I got one more question that I think will be a little bit more of a lighter question to some degree. But thank you for first of all, before we even get to the end, thank you for going so deep into those three topics. I kind of set it up to get into those three things. Those are my three big takeaways from hearing the record in its totality over the time that we worked on it. So thank you for being so open about all that stuff. I think that's really helpful, not just for fans of the record, but maybe for somebody that comes across this video that doesn't even know us for the music or know you for your music. Um, so last thing I want to get into is more on the production side, in terms of making the record. Prior to Guillotine Crowns, you didn't have a recording setup at home. And like most people, you're reliant on people that do have equipment, don't have equipment, trying to scramble to find a studio, whatever. And there was a certain point, I think it was just before the pandemic that, you started to game plan and, ask me like, for feedback on like what kind of equipment to buy and that kind of thing. And, we collectively kind of put together a kit, for you to record at home successfully with, right? So, that then sparked an entire Guillotine Crowns record, side by side with me. And then it also at the same time sparked a full solo album that you fully formed, like I said, sculpted out yourself. That's a lot of material. If you go to the official Uncommon Records playlist on Spotify now, since your album is dropped, your voice is on there as much as mine, and all the recent stuff really has you on it, touching it with verses. So let's talk a little bit about like, how having a recording setup at home like has helped you to not just be more prolific, but also to kind of create what I would say is like a healthy environment for
It
making
gave
music.
it ultimately gave me the safe space to just be myself and be creative on my own terms.
Right.
Because as you know, like anytime I would come and do a record, I'd write it, you know, and then I'd come out to New York and record it with you. Um, the
Right.
only time
Yep.
I
Yeah.
didn't do that was Toxicology, because I was recording with Danko at the
Yeah.
time. But
Mm.
a lot of Lobotomy was recorded with you and my old engineer, that engineered us for Wasteland.
Right.
Autonomy was recorded completely with you. We started Guillotine together with you, and then the
Yeah, we
pandemic
did.
happened. And we kind of had to reset and figure things out. So,
Yeah.
that was kind of the catalyst for that because it was like, well, shit, man, am I gonna wait 2 years, 3 years to go record this record? Am I just gonna just finally, bite down on the mouthpiece and just go out and get my own shit? So, it was it was a combination of finally being in a good financial spot to go do it, because that was the biggest thing. Like I
Hmm.
always wanted to do it, but I just never had the money because for a long time, a lot,
Right.
even just basic recording equipment was like not easy to get. So things finally just became affordable.
Yeah.
Plus, I had a space where I could actually, set up and be, left alone and not being distracted. So that was a big part of it, and also just to have that desire to just create as much as I can until I don't have anything to say. Because when I took that 5 year hiatus, I missed making music, but I just wasn't in a space emotionally, mentally,
Mm.
financially to do it and put my all into it. So it was like I had all these weights lifted off of me, and like the switch just turned on. Because I've teased you about this before, but like Guillotine was the first time that I was out writing you because uh,
Yeah. 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 I was behind. Yeah.
historically,
Yeah.
you had to chase me for things like, did you get this done? Because we
Right.
started working on Lobotomy. It was like 2000, 2007.
Probably around
No, 2000.
08, maybe. Oh yeah, maybe like
2007.
07, 08. Yeah.
You were putting the finishing touches on on Carnage's record when we started.
Oh
It
wow.
took
Yeah.
me 3 years because we put out lobotomy music in 2008.
Hmm.
It took me 3 years to write and record and to put that record together.
And never to be mixed
You
and
know,
released. Yeah.
even the autonomy, it took me years to put that together, and that was just kind of me like emotionally limping to the finish line because it was just like you had asked me like just give me one more record, and I was like, all right, that's kind of and
Yeah.
I like autonomy music a lot because it helped me get through some situations that um I was dealing with at the time, and it gave me like a renewed confidence to make music. But this Guillotine and Painkiller Boutique, as heavy as these concepts are that we took, because Guillotine is very political and socially social commentary driven, and
Hmm.
Painkiller, I've talked about some really heavy things, but I had a lot of fun making these records, and I think that's the biggest difference. Like Lobotomy, I made almost out of necessity to get something out uh, at the time,
Hmm.
because I had just split from Wastelands, and it was like, oh shit, I'm on my own now. What the fuck am I gonna do? So again, thankfully, I had you to kind of be my right hand man, and you know help me pick up the pieces and move forward. And you were moving forward yourself at the time too from your own group.
Yeah. It was around not when we started working on lobotomy, but
Yeah.
by the time lobotomy was out, the presence had
So
also
right.
dissolved.
So we
So
had that connection there, just like trying to figure out where we both go from that point as artists.
yeah.
But so Guillotine and Painkiller Boutique, these gave me feelings of when I first started making music as a teenager. And I
Right.
think that you can see, there's flashes of the confidence, I think, in Lobotomy and, autonomy music for sure, because those are good records. Um, and those
Right.
still stand
Yeah.
up, and I still have people that mention Lobotomy, what is it, 12 years later at this point, so that's great. But these two records,
Yeah.
Hills of Dion and Painkiller Boutique, like this is like my fully formed peak version self. So these were
Hmm.
a lot of fun to make and to challenge myself and in different ways.
Yeah, I think it's dope that like, a simple thing like just making that step to buy some recording equipment at home can really spark like a creative burst that lasts as an arc like longer than 2 years because obviously it took it's not like we finished Guillotine in the spring and put it out, and then we made, or then you made Painkiller Boutique, and then we put it out. Like these things are happening, and you're just like completely like, throwing yourself into being prolific, and it's cool to be prolific. I tell people all the time, like, this is not exactly advice that I had to give you, but like at times, you know you deal with like a younger artist or somebody that just hasn't been able to do it a lot, and it's like, well, how do I get from here to there? And it's always about reps. And you can't get comfortable in the studio without doing it dozens of times, and you can't get comfortable recording yourself until you've done it dozens if not hundreds of times. And it's true with writing, it's true with making beats, it's true with anything. It's always reps, reps, reps. And like the difference between, if there is a difference, because again, like you said, I mean, I think lobotomy and autonomy and even toxicology, which is an EP, are high quality records that, I think there's different aspects that are great about both of them. I think the difference between that and Hills of Dion and Painkiller Boutique is these are the results of more regular
Yeah,
reps recording, more regular reps concepting a song from beginning to end, because a lot of the concepts on Guillotine are yours, that I came in and filled in and brought back around to mean something else or to adjust the concept or whatever. And that's how we've always worked together. Like it was just cool for me for afar to see you kind of just really, like I said, like start and end songs. And, there were some songs that didn't end up making this record that'll probably come out eventually after. But I mean, this guy, I could tell you, like, it's 14 songs on the record, but I mean, it was a time when we were looking in the folder, it was like
Yeah.
18, 20 songs, between beats that were in some stage of writing or songs that were in some stage of recording. So there's a lot more to come from Fuze with his home setup, you know.
Oh man, it's exciting, man, and we're probably gonna be wrapping this up, so I just wanted to again
Yeah.
thank you for being so involved and giving me the space to do what I wanted to do, and having input. And I was talking about this yesterday with Chi Chi from Scratch Vinyl. If I thought about it, I probably should have given
Mm-hmm.
Colossal Structure executive producer credit too, because that guy, I bounced, as much as I was bouncing stuff
Wow,
off of you, I
that's
was
cool.
bouncing everything off of him too. I write verses. What do you think of this? Send him rough versions of songs. Like, what do you
Nice.
think of this? And
That's
he's
dope.
like, yeah, this is dope. Keep going. And thank you for pushing me in the direction that you did, man. Because honestly, like, my stuff, our stuff and my stuff has always been like conceptually heavy. So like when I got the itch to do, some solo material again, honestly, like I kind of wanted to keep it lighter and just do some rap shit. But then I wrote
Mm-hmm.
Graduation Day, and then I sent you uh the rough version for uh excuse me, the Chronic Pain. And you were like, yo, you should
Right.
go in this direction and you should dig deeper. And I was like,
Yeah. Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden that's just kind of like that those two songs opened up the floodgate for everything else. Um and then it was just like it just became like a therapy session for me, and I just kind of just started putting my thoughts down. And so, thank you for pushing me to go that direction and giving me that space. And, uh, the two jams that we did are two of my favorites on the record. And, shout to Def C, that guy is an animal. Um, and that's the song with him is the probably one of the only times ever in my whole career where I was just like, fuck, I think I need to re-record my verse. Because he sent the verse back to me. He was like, "Yeah, man, I hope you dig it. I just tried something different on this. Let me know what you think." And I was like, "Oh shit," because I hope people can pick it up. But that song is an ode to Doom. Um, Shout to Doom. He's
Right.
you know um, one of my favorites, if not my favorite. I go back and forth between him and Kyle all the time. 'Cause those two guys just do things with the
Mm.
English language just like credible. But that was my ode to Doom, and so that's why my flow was a little bit more laid back and subdued on that song. Um, Son and Def C just came in and did his thing, and I was just like, oh shit. So, and shout to Colossal Structure for just you know uh picking up the ball and running with the concept that I gave him, and uh Gyroscope. Those two guys are just amazing dudes and amazing artists, and Uh, shout to Blood Money for giving me the sounds that he gave me and Messiah Music. I've been wanting to work with those two guys for a long time, and especially Messiah Music. That guy, he's an alien, man. He's just the output that he has beat wise is just crazy. Hit him up for some beats. It's like, yeah, man, I got you. And then like within like 20 minutes, I had like a folder of like 20 beats, and I'm like, and for me, like me personally, like that can be overwhelming because it's like, man, there's like you know, 6 or 9 beats in this folder that I can do all kinds of shit with, but I got to narrow it down to get this specific vibe, and that was the hard part. Um, so that just shows you how prolific he is, and
Yeah. Yeah, I'm on the other extreme where, like, I'm like, hey man, we're gonna do an album together, so I'm gonna make you
but
one beat at a time. Here is a beat, and do you like it? yes, cool, right to that. If you don't like it, cool, I'll give it to somebody else, and then I'll make you another beat
but for
right now at this moment. And
but for the way
that's
that
sort of
I've
how it
worked,
works.
Hills of Dion and Painkiller Boutique so special to me is, for me personally, these two records were the closest that I got to
Right.
the picture that I had in my head on what these albums could be. And I think that's why I think that's where it shows. And
Right.
people may some people may pick up on that, and some people may not, which is fine because that's a personal thing for me. So why would somebody else know that if I didn't say that? But though that's the other reason why I think these albums are so good for me personally, is because they are so close to what I envision them being. And that I think that's the biggest thing that made it so fun, was like all the all this happened naturally. Like I didn't have to sit there for hours on end, you know, struggling to come up with concepts. Like the shit was just coming naturally. Like I'd be sitting here,
Right.
working or watching
Yeah.
TV, and all of a sudden lines would just pop in my head, and I'd start writing. So I mean, there was a you sent the beat, City Breathing, the beat. When you sent me the beat for City Breathing, I sent you a verse within like 15 minutes. I never used to write
Yeah. Yeah. I remember
that.
that. Yeah. Nah, that's dope. I think, I mean, I think that's, hopefully, like, as a listener, if you're checking this interview out because you dig the record or because you just want to know more about it before you get into it, I mean, as a fan, hopefully there's some satisfaction in the fact that, what Fuze is saying is just, if an artist feels good about something, then you don't have any reasons to not feel good about it, unless it just, stylistically doesn't, fit your bill. Then that's subjectivity. But otherwise, it's a satisfying experience, even if it does deal with all the heavy topics that we talked about today. So on that note,
I just want
unless you have
to,
something else to say,
not that I forgot
uh,
about him, because just we got
mhm.
sidetracked for a second.
Yeah,
But
sidetrack.
shout out to Dr. Kill. This he broke the
Oh, word, of
foundation
course,
for
yeah,
this
yeah,
record, and that guy is that guy is
yes,
same vein as Messiah Music. Like, be like, yeah, man, I need some more beats, and then the next day I had to have like 16 beats in my fucking inbox, and I'm like, shit, what the fuck am I supposed to do with all these? So shout out to
yeah,
him for giving me, the foundation, because I mean, you did a song on the album, and Messiah Music did too, and Blood Money did too. So you guys added that special sauce on top of, what he already established, and you guys fit perfectly with what he, gave me. So I appreciate all of you, and I couldn't have done it without anybody that contributed anything to this record, because you guys all added something different to it.
yeah, yeah. I agree. I mean, Dr. Kill's beats, were easy to mix to some degree. Like, I knew what to do, and like, he's not going to send you stuff that you have to start doing problem solving, and at times, like some producers that aren't well grounded in, I don't know, ears. I'm not going to say music theory because it's stupid, because I'm not a music theory guy, but like in ear theory, he has that. He knows where the frequencies are supposed to be when he's producing and where the tune is supposed to be and all that. And it was just up to me to kind of do some arrangement, although a lot of it was done for me. But I did some light arrangement and did the mixing, and that was the foundation. I think that was 9 of the 14 songs. So of course, shout out to Dr. Kill, who was able to kind of add his own spin on beats, but also like comes from a similar background to the rest of the producers that have put a lot of stuff out on Uncommon, and fits in perfectly with the sound that we're doing here. So on that note, I will flash this again. I'll get my big fingers out of the way there. But this is the album, this is what we're talking about. Shout out to the cover art as well, of course. Um, a friend of Fuze's, Sasha Side, did this artwork, the original piece here. And then, of course, our man among men, DJ Jazz Pants, put together the layout. And I've talked about this in other videos because we kind of showed this in the Guillotine Crowns unboxing. but this is actually a much better shot of it than I gave you guys then, of what the album looks like. And of course, all this artwork, again, laid out by Jazz Pants. Inside, there's a gatefold. I won't open this pristine copy that's going to go to somebody that orders it, but there's a gatefold digipack, and it folds out, big collage, nice, Gaja Forever right underneath the disc, and the disc itself, of course, has our Loyalty Star layout. But we always try to put a lot into the art and the presentation, but it's supposed to look like something, and I tell people this all the time when it comes to cover art. My philosophy is your album is supposed to look like it's important, period. Like, it's not supposed to look like it was thrown together with a fucking, on a fucking Kinko's machine, unless you're actually doing DIY music in the 90s, the way I did. These days it's supposed to look like it's about something. And, this shit definitely looks like it's about something, because it is. But also, the cover can't fall short when you're doing music like this. The art, the music, the engineering, the production, it can't fall short when you're trying to do something as important as what Short Fuse is doing on this record. It all has to. A long time ago, somebody told me, they're like, yo, if you're doing, and not that this is particularly the most experimental, record, because that wasn't the goal, but if you're doing experimental or non-mainstream music, it has to sound 10 times better than pop music, because if you put a barrier of engineering in between something that is asking for somebody to go out of their normal comfort zone, they're never going to do it. So that's the mentality we have in Uncommon. So shout out to this record, Short Fuse. Go and pick it up. UncommonRecords.bandcamp.com, uncommonacid.com. Go to the shop.
Peace.
Peace, y'all.